Stella, did you want to get started?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I just wanted to make a few announcements. My name is Stella Hart and I'm with Iowa Campus Compact. And we'll be holding several webinars like this over the course of November and in early December. I'm going to post a list in the chat function of this Zoom webinar. I'll do that now. And then let's see here. Oh, the other announcement I wanted to make was that the recording of this webinar and all of the slides from the presentation will be made available on the MLKDayGrants.org website afterwards. And that's it. Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leslie Garvin with North Carolina Campus Compact, and we are very excited to host this webinar today. We have been working with the Martin Luther King grants since 2008. So I know that with grantees, there are lots of questions about the fiscal side of it, the documentation, what are some best practices. So I am very excited that today we have 3 former grantees, current grantees, who have been running amazing large-scale Martin Luther King Days of Service for several years. And so they really are experts in how to do this and do it well. We have Melissa Lyon, who is the program manager for the Office of Civic Engagement and Service Learning at Fayetteville State University, followed by Tim Stewart, who is the director of the Office of Service Learning at Belmont University. And then finally, we'll have Kate Johnson, who's the Associate Director of Appalachian and the Community Together, which is a community engagement office at Appalachian State University. What we're going to try to do today is the first 2 presenters are going to talk more about the fiscal documentation and some best practices around project management. And then Kate is going to specifically talk about many of you are familiar with the MLK Challenge model, which many campuses have adopted. She'll talk a little bit about that and the lessons learned and project management best practices that they've gained over the years. So what we're going to do is, you're seeing our faces now. Melissa, say hello. I think your face will come up if you do that.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations on your award.
Kate, say hello. She might be muted. Tim, if you'll say hello.
Hello.
And now we're actually going to close our videos so that you can concentrate on the slides. Sorry, and we will get started now with Melissa.
All right. As Leslie was saying, in that Fayetteville State University has done the MLK Day of Service and that for a number of years. And I did want to say, once again, congratulations on your award and that. But one of the biggest things for your planning in that is the aspect that documentation is key. You really want to make sure to plan ahead on how you're going to document those. And I've got on this slide here, there is actually links to the NC Campus Compact toolkits that Kate will talk about a little bit more regarding the MLK Challenge. But the next point that I wanted to make was just don't wait. I begin as soon as you've gotten your award letter saying that, yes, you've been awarded this. Begin with starting to set up your accounting in that with your institutions and contracts and grants offices and all of that. So you can actually start spending your money in that. And make sure that you're using your budget as your guide. I've always used the idea of taking the budget that I submitted for the grant in the Excel file and using that as a starting point for actually tracking and managing everything throughout the process and making sure to keep all of that documentation handy. The next thing I want to talk about was the matching funds and that I know everybody is always concerned about the idea of how do we get this match? How do we come up with all the amount of money that we need to have for match and that? You want to make sure that don't forget to include a lot of these different things that many people forget to include that are large for your matching funds. For example, the personnel time. People put in a lot of time with the planning and that for the MLK Day of Service events and that. But make sure that you're following those background checks and timesheet requirements, which I knew was a change that that surprised us in that last year and that. But it's not hard to deal with, just making sure you're following those requirements and that. And one thing that I learned was to actually check with your institution and see what their policies already are and that, because they might already have the policies that fulfill the requirements for the grant in place. So you might not need to go outside of your institution to get that, those following those requirements. You want to make sure to track all of your donations, making sure to keep those receipts and documentations of those donations. As you can see, I've got an example here on the screen about somebody who purchased some tablecloths for the event, but says, "Oh no, you can have them. I don't want to be reimbursed for them." Make sure you ask them for that receipt, so that way you can have that receipt to include within your documentation. Discounts are a really big thing with matching funds and that, and the only way that you can include and count those discounts in that is with that appropriate documentation. So if for example, a restaurant is giving you a discount on box lunches for your participants, make sure to ask for a specific receipt that documents that documentation of that discount, because without that documentation of that discounted price, you can't count those that discount as matching in-kind funds. So you might need to work with your vendors and that, and where you're getting your fund or your foods and that from, and those discounts and that, and make sure to just ask for that specific documentation saying that they're giving you that discount of that specific amount. Printing is another thing that can be included with your matching funds and that. A lot of times you have a lot of different meetings and you need to print agendas, you need to print all these other different types of documents and that. And at our institution, we have a specific cost per printing for each page and that, whether it's in color and black and white. What I've done in the past is I've just kept tracking an Excel file. I had this meeting date on this time. I printed out this many copies of this document, and this was the cost for that, and kept the running total of that throughout the whole planning process and that, and was included that in that matching funds. But without that documentation, you can't include it. So documentation is very important. Another key for matching funds in that is oftentimes specific units in that on campus and that might provide support without charge to your grant, but just request documentation of what that cost would have been. For example, last year when we were doing our MLK Day of Service and that, and with the background checks and the requirements and that, our legal affairs office actually provided our background checks at no cost to the grant, and they absorbed the fees, but we were able to get documentation from that unit specifically stating that this is what the costs were and that they paid those costs, so that was used as matching funds. Space and where you're actually doing your day of service or hosting the get-togethers at the beginning and the end of the day, and that can add up. Like, there's costs associated with that use of the space. So ask for that specific documentation about the use of space and what it would cost for an organization to use that space. So if you can get that documentation, you can include that as matching funds. So there's the idea that think of outside of the box for all of those ideas of getting those matching funds, because it's easy to come up with all of those matching funds if you think of all of those different things that can be included. One of the other big things for reporting and documentation in that is that idea that you have to have a plan for collecting the data during the event, because there's usually that snapshot report that is due right after the event. And you don't want to spend the rest of your night until midnight trying to get all of that information compiled. So you want to know ahead of time what you're going to need to collect and how it will be collected before the event. So that way you can make sure, whether it's those sign-in sheets, so you know how many people were there and what projects they used, whether you have project impact reports that are submitted by the site leaders at each of those different projects. So you can easily compile that information at the end and it makes it easy on yourself by collecting the information during the event instead of waiting until the very end and trying to tally it all up. And, oh, was it this or was it that? So you really want to make sure to have that plan in advance as to what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it. Some other considerations and challenges in that I just wanted to touch on. Timelining of the planning for the MLK Day of Service, and that is sometimes can be challenging in that at our institution, in that the planning and that actually begins right around our homecoming time. So the students aren't always, they're focused on homecoming instead of focused on MLK Day of Service. Plan about how you're going to work around that holiday break and what you're going to do before the holiday break, what you're going to do after the holiday break, and when the students return. Having that committed planning team is very important, and I know that Tim will talk more about this later, so I won't spend too much time on that. But I definitely want to say plan ahead. I know you've submitted your proposals and all of that, and you were awarded that grant, so you've done some planning already in that, but continue that planning and planning ahead, and don't wait for that last minute. Promotional materials and that, there's lots of resources out there for that promotional materials. Use those resources that are available for you. Some of the other considerations and challenges that we've come up with and worked through is the idea of risk management and transportation. We've always had our legal affairs office help us with a waiver of liability. There's issues with the transportation of if you're transporting, we've always had the issue of we can only transport FSU students on FSU vehicles, but so how are you going to transport community members if they need to, or other institutional members or other school members and that are volunteering in that. Making sure that you have plans for providing accommodations, and not only thinking people with disabilities and that, but also those ones that are under 18. There was plenty of years that we've had troops of Girl Scouts come out and really young kids coming out, having to have a project that they can also participate in. So you want to make sure to think about all of those things in advance. One of the big key things that I want to point out is maintaining that communication with your community partner agencies prior to the event and on the day of the event. Make sure they have a contact number, so if something's going on, they can call somebody's cell phone and say, this is happening, what do I do? And the last and final things that I wanted to focus on, and that was the idea of planning ahead for reflection and evaluation in that of the event. It's very important to plan ahead and how you're going to do that reflection. And you always want to get that evaluation and that feedback about the event, so that way you can figure out how to improve it for each time that you're doing it. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Melissa. And folks, as we're going, if you have questions, please be sure to include those in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end when we get to the question and answer. And now we're going to get ready for Tim from Belmont.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. That was a project we had 2 years ago. I see the picture there. And we've been very fortunate the last, I guess this is our 7th year now, to have a multi-campus day of service. And we started out with 3 campuses here in the Nashville community. We have a number of schools. And we are, this year we actually have 6 schools that are collaborating as part of the planning team. And we're thankful that 2 HBCUs are part of the process. Fiscal University here in Nashville and Meharry Medical College are working with us. And we've worked with Tennessee State University a lot in the past. They've actually gotten their own grant this year, and so they're doing a project the following weekend because their students don't actually come back until after MLK Day. But we actually last year, even though they weren't one of the sponsors of our grant, had about 40 students who were already back in town and came to our project from Tennessee State. But it's just been a tremendous experience. If you are doing a multi-campus project, recruiting staff and students from each campus to be a part of it. And of course, getting the right people is the most important thing in any planning team. People who can be most helpful, if you have staff that have influence or connections or money. I've gotten some folks from our university ministries involved, and they have some funds that they can contribute to that. People who have good connections with departments, if we need some money from a department. We have an MLK committee here on campus for Belmont's MLK week of activities. And so I've gotten some folks who are involved in that, involved in our planning team as well. And they help promote our day of service. And then they also have provided some funds in the past to help us with our match. And then, of course, student leaders are really important to have them on your planning team. And don't be afraid to give the students. I know sometimes it's scary to give the students a lot of responsibility, and sometimes they do disappoint a little bit or not come through the way that you'd hope that they would. But I try to view this as a learning experience for all involved. We are educators, hopefully, and so we try to put safety nets in place to pick up the slack if the students don't come through like they're supposed to. But by and large, to turn it over and let the students do what they can, and be pleasantly surprised sometimes with what they're able to come up with and do. We've found some good success in rotating our regular meetings. We go from campus to campus so that each campus feels more invested in the process, and it makes it a little bit easier for the folks from that campus to be involved if they're hosting it at a given time. And then we started out back in October, and we've met I think the first meeting, then we had about 3 weeks before the second one. But as we're getting closer to the event, our meetings will become more frequent, probably every other week, and then maybe even weekly. We've got to get everything done, as you know, if you've gotten a grant before, with the holiday break coming. Really, most schools are done by the first week in December, so you really have a month where not a whole lot can happen, or it can, but it's just much more difficult. So the more things you can get done before the semester ends, and have things as much as possible in place, because even if you're still around over the break, there are a lot of vendors and people that you might be working with who they're on holiday as well. And so sometimes it's hard to get in touch with people if they're out. And so the more things you can have lined up and in place, with all your logistics and everything confirmed. I will say not to worry as much maybe about getting students involved and signed up and committed. We have an online sign up that we've used. We've actually used Google Forms in the past, but many of our campuses, including Belmont, have an online tracking program and the students use to sign up for a variety of service projects. And so many of our campuses are using that. And so we have a central website where people can go, and they can go to the links for each of the campuses if they have their own online sign-up system. But students are notorious for not signing up until the very last minute. And so we always plan for that, and don't worry about it too much. One of the things that we found very helpful, and many of you may already use that, but is to set up a shared folder to share documentation, communication, things like that. We set up a Google folder that everybody has access to, and put documents in there, or chart of work, and people can put receipts and things like that, scan those and put those in there as well. So it's a repository for us to keep everything together. We having 6 campuses involved in this, many of the community partners we work with, all of our campuses work with them, but there are some that are unique to each campus. And so having the campuses come together, we found some projects that we haven't known about in the past. And so, for example, Vanderbilt's worked with the Society of St. Andrew, which is an organization here in Nashville that does food, works with food deserts. And we hadn't worked with them before, but now we're connecting with them, and other campuses are working with them throughout the year, not just with the MLK project. We actually have created an online form for the partners to use. Again, Google Forms are a pretty good way to do that, so that they can submit information about the projects. That you contact person for the day of, and all that information is very important for you to have. You can capture that and keep it in one place. And that's really a good way to do it. And then assigning a planning team members to each project. So, for example, the Vanderbilt project with the Society of St. Andrews, the Vanderbilt folks took that on to kind of coordinate that and spearhead that. We also worked with an urban farm that one of our other schools, Trevecca University, has. And so those students sort of took the lead in planning that project. But it's good to have a team that can work with each project. Determining your needs as you're gathering resources. What are you going to do? We plan at our events to have a meal. We think that's an important part of the experience, to bring people together and share food, even if it's only pizza, which students like, so it's not usually a problem. But we plan to have a time together with fellowship and with food, and have a program, a brief program with some speakers. We usually invite our congressmen and senators and the mayor, folks like that. And then transportation, and that's a big issue, as some, I think, mentioned about the risk management part of it. We struggle with that initially, and we found that even though it's a pretty big expense, it usually is best to get some outside transportation, because the issues of if universities have transportation, transporting people who are not from their university, we were able to work around that and use some buses from Tennessee State one year, but we found that in general, it's best to just use an outside provider. Gray Line has partnered with us, and they give us a pretty nice discount, which we count that contribution part towards our match. But determining what you need to do what you want to do, and then you've obviously gotten a grant, you've applied, you have a budget and an idea, but those things may change a little bit as you get into the project. And for example, we're looking at perhaps ramping up our size and maybe having more than 300 people that we'd originally planned for. So obviously the grant's not going to get any bigger. So if we want to have more T-shirts and more people involved, we're going to have to find, and more buses, we're going to have to find more resources for that. And again, using your planning team's campus and community contacts. Somebody knows somebody somewhere, and that's a really big thing to draw on. It's one of the benefits of working as a team. We had somebody say, "Oh yeah, we work with Bank of America. We could probably get them to help sponsor this." And so it's like, great, that would be wonderful. So we're pursuing all options. And then one of the things that we've done, I'm not sure how much of an incentive it has been, but we have different sponsorship levels. And we count, if you give a cash donation or an in-kind donation that's worth $500, you're a gold sponsor, for example. And we found that people like to be gold sponsors. And so, if we asked for $300, they might have given us that, but we say, hey, would you like to be a gold sponsor and give it this level? So that can be helpful to folks, but then also have some more moderate levels that people can be a part of. And we include their logos on our T-shirt or on the posters that we put up around the celebration, and of course mention them. We also have a solicitation letter that we keep in that shared Google folder that people can use when they're asking for donations. I will say that you do want to coordinate that, and it's probably a good idea. I know here at Belmont, whenever we go to solicit, we have to clear it with our development folks to make sure that we're not asking from somebody that they've already asked something recently, or they're planning to ask an even bigger gift from in the near future. So that may be a little tricky, but a lot of times you're asking for things that, donation of some food or donation of door prizes, that it's not that difficult. But be aware that sometimes you can get in trouble. I mean, sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, but don't assume that when you're going out and soliciting in your community. And then, of course, invite your sponsors to attend the event. We always invite them to come. And then we send thank you notes, and usually if we have T-shirts left over, send those to the folks as well. I think the next slide, record keeping, setting up a procedure is very important. We get the receipts, scan the receipts once you get them, and put them in a shared folder so that way we know where they are. Sometimes people will misplace receipts. We encourage people to do that as quickly as possible. And the discounts, documenting discounts. For example, our food services paid for some pizzas. They didn't have the capacity to actually prepare 75 pizzas last year, so they actually bought 75 pizzas from Papa John's. And they gave us a receipt that showed how much those pizzas would have retailed for if they had paid the full price for that, and then how much they actually paid for it. So we were able to use the full amount that they would have charged for the discount. We didn't show. We showed the cash money that we paid for the actual amount, but then the donated part was there as well. So keep good records of your discounts. And I can't stress enough too the idea of the donations of space, because we do these in big venues that would have cost a lot of money to rent out. For example, last year we used Second Harvest Food Bank's facilities. They have a big meeting room, and it would have cost over $2,000 if we had rented that for the 6 hours we were there that day. So keep track of all those things and use those towards your match. Recruitment, we have an online sign-up process, as I mentioned. We do have a single website that we use and direct people to specific campus sign-ups if they have their own sign-up. If they don't have their own system, we have a Google form in place for folks to sign up. But it's really helpful because then you have a record of who said they're going to be there. And then you can pull lists and have people check in. What we usually do is we pull complete rosters of each for each sign-in area. And since we usually have 200 to 300 students, we have multiple sign-in tables. And rather than have, we've learned this from the past, rather than have like A through D at this line and E through K at this line or something like that, we just have a complete roster of every person who signed up by schools at each of those sign-in places. And so that way when people come, they can go to any line that's open. They can go to the shortest line and they can check in there, and then we go back and compile all of the things there. I'm getting a little bit ahead. Should be on recruitment, but using multiple channels to recruit, people to people, campus organizations, a friend inviting a friend, of course, email, social media, videos, posters. This year, one of our student groups is going to do, I think Fiscal is going to do a video to help promote this. And so we'll actually use their company that they have, and they'll send us a bill that we'll use because it's what they would charge if they'd done this video, and be able to count that towards our match because it's a donation, in-kind donation. And one of the things that we discovered, it took us a little while, but last year we made it a lot simpler on ourselves and a lot more successful. In the past, we had done, when you signed up, you chose which project you wanted to go to, and some of you may have only one project, so this obviously is not an issue, but if you have multiple projects that you're going to be doing, we had people who signed up who didn't show up, and we had people who showed up who hadn't signed up, and so trying to match vacant spaces and people that needed to go. And it just was very, very challenging. So last year, you didn't sign up ahead of time for a specific project. You just signed up to come. And then when you got there, we had the projects, the signups for each project around the room, and people would go and they would sign up. We encouraged folks not to all go, like everybody from the same campus, to go to the same project, to mix and be sure that there was a mix from each of the campuses. And that worked pretty well. There was some clustering of campuses, but by and large that worked well. And then we had a roster, so that when the team leaders were ready to go to the site, they would just pick up that sign-up sheet. Those people were probably there because they just signed up a few minutes ago. And so that worked out really well. And we were able to match the spots to the people who were actually there very efficiently and very effectively. The day of sign-up projects. If you have a central meeting, as I just mentioned that, if you have a central meeting point, if you're going to be meeting, some places they do the projects where you just meet directly at the site. So obviously that's not going to work. But if you are having a central gathering, having that sign-in process there. One of the things we do with the risk management release forms and waivers, we actually send those out to all the people who've registered in advance. We send copies of those. We have a few copies on site for people to look at. And then rather than have everybody sign a waiver, now the only people we would do, if we do, we have had some high school students in the past, and so we will ask people who are under 18 to bring a signed waiver with them. Since they have a copy of it in the email, they can print it out and bring that with their parent's signature on it. But other folks, we just ask that they read it and that they initial by their name when they sign in, that they've read the release. So that saves a lot of paper and makes it easier to make sure that everybody complies. All right, that's all I have.
Thanks, Tim. I want to remind everybody again, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can wait until Kate has finished for our question and answer time. And now we'll have Kate Johnson from Appalachian State University.
Great, thank you. So we have been working with MLK Challenge. This will be our 18th year. I've been a part of the program. I guess this will be my 9th year. So about half its lifespan. A little bit about our model. If you've looked at the toolkit, that's pretty much it. We've some of those are a little bit old, the letters and such. So we've changed some things, but the base remains the same. We work with a committee that is student run, with staff, faculty, and grad student site leaders, a staff and grad advisor. We, much like Tim was saying, we randomly assign to groups, so similar. And we do that specifically so that people are connecting with new people. We often market this program as an opportunity for transfer students, international students, students just looking to make connections. So not just a service event, but sort of a retention tool as well. Part of our model is we give teams a really big task, a really big challenge, with a little bit of seed money that we get through a grant. We weave reflection throughout the day, so we're doing some pre-flexion, on-site reflection, and then large group reflection at the end of the day when we come back together. And sort of a trademark signature of our event is this tone of excitement and challenge. And our motto is, "It's all a part of the challenge," which we have them chant, which is a little bit much for college students at 9 a.m., but we hear it's all a part of the challenge throughout the year. Students really connect with it, it resonates with them. So my advice after doing this for a few years is, first and foremost, create a clear plan and vision for the event. So this is, if you're working with students, and I acknowledge too that not all campuses, does it work to have a student committee? So you might have a mix of staff, students, whatever works for you, but I'll work with our model. This is a great way to work with students. We have a timeline that we use, but we have them every year look at the date and do a little backwards designing, and they set their own timeline with some input from us. We have job descriptions for each position, which you'll see in the toolkit, which changes every year based on what we learn from the year before. I think Melissa said, they evaluate after each event. Definitely do that, because we learn some big lessons. Even after 18 years, we learn something we have to change, something we could do better. So job descriptions really help with that, of who is doing what, so that you can give them a lot of responsibility, like Tim said, and check in with them as needed and support them. And that includes advisors. We have a full-time staff advisor as well as a grad student. Most of our grad students are in our college student development program, so they're looking to do something like this as a career. So it's a great development opportunity for them as well. Deadlines are key, and that seems obvious, but sometimes when I know, as soon as I forget to put a deadline on something, it takes 3 times as long. And so I highly recommend that. And share that vision early on to get everyone on the same page, to prevent confusion later. And that includes not only your committee, but your colleagues, if they have any part of it, or they're going to help you advertise, market, or recruit, your supervisors, your kind of key stakeholders and administrators on campus. Just make sure everyone sort of knows what's happening. I highly recommend, don't be afraid to start small. So if this is your first year, and I know there's sort of stipulations depending on the grant, but meet your campus where they're at. I find that building on a solid foundation, our program has grown year after year, but starting small is key if you want a program that lasts. Let's see. institutionalize and brand the event early, especially if this is going to be an annual event for you. This had already been done for me before I came into this position, and it really helps. If you are going to be planting seeds to ask for permanent funding after the grant runs out, invite upper administrators to take part. We had a very engaged chancellor, our last chancellor, and he was a site leader for us. Our vice chancellor would come in every couple of years and volunteer on the day, bringing key stakeholders on campus, both staff and students, because they can help you recruit. And then once they know what the event is about, they can help spread the word and really establish it as a kind of a must do. A lot of our students say that doing the MLK challenge is on their bucket list. If they didn't do it their first few years, they would definitely want to do it before they graduate. And then we have students who happen upon it their first year, and then they engage all 4 years, which is pretty cool. We recruit our service learning faculty, our first year seminar instructors, our faculty who have worked with our program before, and ask them for recommendations as well. So they might have served as a learning partner for our alternative service experience program, or sat on a panel for our social justice coffee hour. So they sort of know what we do, but this is a great way to get them really engaged, to see what your program can offer, and maybe connect it, depending on your office structure, to other things you do in your office. Create a consistent look to make advertising easily recognizable to the people you're recruiting year after year, and also so you're not reinventing the wheel. We typically go with a pretty classic picture of MLK. We choose a quote every year that sort of we run throughout the event, weave it into our reflections, and things like that. That really helps to just keep it going. We also try to, back to institutionalizing, we try to incorporate alumni. We have, for the folks who do MLK Challenge for 4 years, we have a legacy pin. So students can feel like they're really a part of the legacy here on campus. And we get a grant from University of Highlands, which is an apartment complex, sort of loosely linked with the campus. But years ago, they donated to us, and we talked them into making it an annual thing. And so that's how we get our giveaways and our seed money. And we put their logo on that. Use your networks, and I think Tim alluded to this, so I won't spend too much time on it, but draw in groups and offices that have natural connections, service and leadership floor, multicultural student development, key administrators and stakeholders. Use the people you know to get to those you have to know, or you want to know, as Tim said. Use your students when they have buy-in, their ability to recruit. That word of mouth recruitment is the best way to get students there. And once it was established as kind of like the thing to do, we really don't have to do much year after year to get that excitement going. We usually fill up pretty quickly. Also targeting target recruiting groups that might benefit from participating. So transfer students, international students, first year students. Oftentimes we have connections to the Dean of Students office and the counseling center in our health and wellness, and they will sort of refer students to us of, oh, you're looking to meet people, this is a great way. Or you're looking to get to know the community better, you're feeling a little lost, this is a great way to engage. Set everyone up for success. So clear expectations for everyone. And this is so important. So you are training your site leaders so they know what to expect. Provide them information on what the day will look like, what to be prepared for, bringing a positive attitude and flexibility, provide them icebreakers and team builders they can do with their groups, and how to reflect why that's important. And because we found that group dynamics can make or break an experience, really having those site leaders attending to those dynamics is really important. As Tim mentioned, working really closely with community partners, I think Melissa mentioned that as well. you can't over communicate. They might disagree if you're hounding them with details, but you want everyone to be on the same page and in the loop. Aim for longevity. If these are partners you can count on year after year, we have those we know are going to be a part of the MLK Challenge. It's just a matter of figuring out what that project is. We often do a lot of coaching of community partners of essentially how big projects need to be to keep a group of 10 or 11, 12 people engaged for the entire day, 6 hours. And usually it's a lot larger than they realize. And then we really prep our students to see problems as stepping stones rather than obstacles. And so it's all a part of the challenge is great when suddenly it snows on the day of your event. And students can choose to be devastated, or they can laugh and be like, okay, how are we going to handle this? Because that has happened. Reflection is so important as well. And you can do this in a variety of ways. We try to, we do an educational piece in the morning. So we have a speaker. We usually tie in an MLK speech. We have, facts on the tables, things like that. We try to give as much information as we can. And then we try to, as a part of our opening ceremony, we go over kind of rules, guidelines for the day, best practices, if you will. And in that, we're really having them reflect. So who are they serving? Why are we here? What can we do? How is this going to impact your behavior in the future? So planting those seeds in the morning, and then preparing reflection for them to have over lunch on site. A lot of site leaders will report that they reflected in the van on the way back. Whatever works for your group is great. Sometimes, if there's a quiet activity, you can just ask them their thoughts and, what they're thinking and what they've learned that day while you're, deep cleaning somewhere. And we really give site leaders a lot of autonomy to get that done. And then when we return back, we have them, so if they've reflected in the van on the way back, then they might be ready for the large group reflection. And this is really cool because people can do it at their own pace. So if you have groups returning, at different times, we always have that one group that's, half hour late. They can talk amongst their group about their experience in their day. And usually each group has at least one pretty awesome story to share. And we have them create a visual representation as well. So once all the groups are back, our large group reflection is we have a representative share a story from the day. And it could be what they accomplished. It could be someone they met. It could be, a cool problem they overcame. And then they add their visual piece to the reflection. One year it was a puzzle. And so everyone wrote their thing. They made puzzle pieces that was very complex. One year we used a quote, the MLK, it's not coming to me, but something about planting an apple tree. So we had a big sheet painted with an apple tree and they wrote their reflections on apples and they put them up on the tree. One year we put a bunch of postcards. So whatever works for your school is a great way. But that visual reflection or that visual piece is great. And then we display it for the next few weeks after the event. Let's see. So some things we've learned. Be prepared for anything and have a great attitude about it. Something is going to break. Something's going to fall through. We rented a bunch of vans from Enterprise one year and someone had broken into their keys and stolen the keys to our vans. So the vans were there, but we had no way to drive them. And so we just said, of course, what can we do? And so we started making plans to change some projects into walking. We always have some backup projects in our back pocket in case we have too many people show up or more people than expected. There's never too many of walking projects. They can do litter cleanups, pay it forward kind of things. It could snow, it could rain, it could ice. So what are you going to do in that case? Be prepared if you have to cancel, some projects, or if no one shows. Just know that anything can happen, and it's okay. And the message we send to our students is, it's okay if 100 people show or if 20 people show. The right people are going to be there, and you're going to make it work, and you're going to try to do right by your community partners. And that really takes the pressure off they put on themselves. And then having extra challenges, like I said, in case a lot more people show. Know your campus culture and sort of how they might react to that. Pad your timeline for the day. Transitions take a really long time, and problems are going to arise, like a group is going to come back really late, or a community partner might cancel last minute. And so we always have trivia questions and prizes on hands. We have MLK speeches queued up with activities associated with them in case we need to use up some time. We have a bonus challenge, which is really helpful in filling the gaps of if somehow your challenge takes half the, 3 hours rather than 6 hours. A bonus challenge is going out and getting donations for a scholarship or a nonprofit or a food drive or something like that. And that can fill in a lot of time. We oftentimes, if there's anything perishable that gets donated, like a wheel of cheese, flowers, a platter of sandwiches, all of those things have happened. Then we auction them off there at the event. And if people don't have money, they can bring in an IOU, and that money goes to the bonus challenge. Every year is different, so just accept that and embrace it. But the more solid a framework you put in place, it'll allow for more flexibility and creativity to responding to issues as they arise. For us, we always recruit more students than we need. We can handle around 230 folks, but we sign up well over 300, and we just know there's going to be a little bit of a melt there. And then, as I said earlier, start small and build a little every year. It'll really build naturally as student interest and investment builds across campus. So that is all I have. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. We have 10 minutes for Q&A, or about 11 minutes. So you can either type something in the chat, or you can say it out loud. If you're actually joining us, you'd have to unmute your microphone. But we would love to answer any questions at this time. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see anything yet, and I'm not hearing anyone. Just remember, you have to click on your name and then unmute your mic if you're trying to talk to us. And Tim and Melissa and Kate, if you thought of anything while you were listening to the other presenters that you wanted to still share, feel free to do that right now also. And just a reminder that in the chat box, Stella from Iowa Campus Compact, the lead funder for this for this grant, she did put in the links to the future trainings that are coming up. Any questions? Kate, Melissa, are you guys hearing me, Tim?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
We're
Right.
It's really great to hear. It's always inspiring to hear what other people are doing and to get good ideas. And so take advantage of these training opportunities that are there. I learn something new every time, and I've been doing.
Tim, I think we lost you. All right, I know Tim was talking. I think we lost what he was saying, but I agree. I've been doing this since 2008, and I'm always hearing new ideas, new ways of thinking. I will say this. It's pretty clear that the three presenters have fairly large-scale projects. And I think they all recognize that many on the phone may just be doing one big project at one site, or maybe at a smaller institution. And I think, going back to what Kate said, start small and build if that's your ambition. But the same practices are still valid no matter how big or how small, you know, with the documentation, with the planning ahead, with the timeline. Great. Okay, so I see a question in the chat. I'm currently working on the background checks for all of our covered positions. Do you have any tips for completing this process? I think that would be for Melissa or Tim to answer.
I'll go ahead. One of the first things I did when I found out about the background check requirement was I actually contacted our legal affairs office, because I know that all employees have to have the background check, and sent them the requirements from the grant saying this is what we need to have. And then I asked that, and then they sent back and responded and going, okay, and this is how we run our background checks. And I sent that back on to Iowa Campus Compact and going, this is what we have, and got approval that yes, that meets the requirements. So I would definitely start with your legal affairs office or whatever it's referred to on your campus, and see if they can provide assistance with that, and then go from there.
I think that's great advice as well. We try, if we can, because it is a lot of work to get the background checks, but it also is a lot of work to keep up with the documentation. It is a great source of match if you can do that, because you can count a pretty big amount for the volunteer's time. Or if you're a staff person, your time on that. But we try, just because it's a little easier to find our match without having to depend on that. So that simplifies the record keeping and the efforts there. So if you're able to find your match without having to do the counting people's time, that's a good way to do it as well.
Great. Is there anybody else on the line who is a former grantee who has any suggestions about the background check process? Or are there any other questions at this time?
Hey, Leslie, this is Justin with Iowa Campus Compact. I'm speaking through Stella's line, but I just wanted to send out to anybody who's listening that if you do have questions about background checks, please don't feel free to email or to call me. I'm happy to walk you through the process, and we can work with that with you on those issues together. So don't feel afraid to do that.
And Justin, there's a question: are the background checks for 2 years?
They are good for as long as that person is employed at that institution.
Okay.
So if your institution wants to re-up those, that's up to your institution. But for the purposes of CNCS, you do them once and you're done.
Great. And again, that was Justin from Iowa Campus Compact. You all should have his email. He's the one who's been sending the grant announcements and letting you know the great news about being selected. Any other questions? Here's Justin's email in the chat.
And I definitely want to say that Justin was very supportive last year with all of my questions. I emailed him multiple times about the background checks. Very responsive.
Well, I guess if there are no questions in the chat, or I think that's a compliment to our presenters, because they were so thorough and so engaging that folks have gotten all their questions answered. So we want to thank you all for your time. You can certainly email Justin with any grant-related questions. And you see on this final screen that I do have contact information for all of us. And Justin, I believe you're going to be sending these slides out.
Yep, we'll be sending the slides out. We're also going to post a recording of this training onto YouTube, and we'll have a recording available on the project website as out. And everyone's going to receive a link to it, so that way you all have that in your email inboxes.
Okay, well, we are going to conclude with 5 minutes to spare. Good luck, everyone, with your Martin Luther King Day of Service planning. As we have on our slide, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And MLK Day is a great opportunity to honor Dr. King and to help build partnerships in our community I think there's a lot of need for that these days. So thank you all. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.